In the Perspectrum podcast, we discuss controversial topics. Outside of this context, Michael and I are both working professionals. While doing this show, we are not acting as agents or representatives of our respective institutions, and none of the views that we express reflect the outlooks of our employers. So don't come to my office and throw toilet paper at me.
And I don't have an office, but don't come to my cube.
Welcome to the Perspectrum. I'm Nathan Seelove.
I'm Michael Bloom.
And we are back. We picked the wrong 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. We picked the wrong 3-4 weeks to take off. Like, holy
but
shit.
I feel like we have not been picking anything lately. I don't know about you. Life has been so crazy. Like
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. And but holy shit, when we left, Musk and Trump were still BFFs.
Still friends.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I was
we have to stop taking breaks because every time we take a break, shit hits the fan.
Yeah. But then again, every time we don't take a break, shit also hits the fan because we have a fucking sociopathic fascist narcissist in the White House.
Yeah, fair enough.
I remember when the Trump-Musk breakup happened, and I was like, oh, I'm so excited to get on the pod and talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the United States invaded L.A., and I was like, oh, wow, I'm really excited to talk about that.
Yeah.
And then there was the biggest protest in the history of the country, the No King's Day protest, which I was, by the way, I was a part of. And I was like, oh, I'm excited to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And then Trump started a fucking war in the Middle East.
Yeah, that does kind of eclipse all the fun stuff that has happened since then.
Yeah, so today it's all about Iran.
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking about Iran, how the fuck we got here, what's going on, and what might happen. Because honestly, at this point, as of right now, as of this taping, there is a ceasefire ish. But who knows how long that's going to last?
Yeah.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, we are dealing with 3 countries that historically are not good at following agreements, that are led by people that are oftentimes dishonest actors and irrational actors. So who the fuck knows what's going to happen?
Yeah,
who the fuck knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, but we'll talk through some possibilities, and none of them are awesome. Cool. So why are we talking about this? If you have been living under Iran, not Iraq, Iran, you may not have heard that the U.S. Air Force joined a bunch of Israeli strikes on Iran under President Trump's orders, and the U.S. Air Force dropped a bunch of huge 30,000-pound bombs on a number of nuclear facilities in Iran on Sunday, June 21st. So this was a bunch of our largest bombers, B-2 bombers, and along with a ton of missiles launched by submarines. This campaign, this operation called Operation Midnight Hammer, which, boy, couldn't pick a better name for an operation led by a bunch of warmongers.
No, it's the perfect name because to them every problem looks like a nail.
God, I didn't even think of that. That is very accurate. So they conducted the largest strike, the bomber strike in U.S. history. More than 125 aircraft, including a bunch of decoy aircraft as well. Dropped 75 precision guided weapons and munitions, including a ton of our 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs on some enrichment facilities and nuclear facilities in Iran.
Before we get into kind of the results of that, before we get into all of that stuff, let's contextualize this. And I actually want to do a ton of contextualizing.
I agree.
In fact, I want to give us 70 years worth of contextualizing.
Yeah.
Because so Michael and I have talked about the history of Iran before.
Sorry we fucked up your country segment.
In a sorry we fucked up your country segment. We did that a long time ago. I think I was still living at my grandmother's house when we did that. So I don't even know what episode that was, way back when. But let's just do a very, very quick refresher on the history of Iran. so that we understand some aspects of how we got here.
Yeah, I think this is so important because so much of this discussion that people are having right now in like, media and the news and even the administration is just focused on like this very narrow period of time.
Yeah.
Israel and Iran have been trading airstrikes, and then the US gets involved and bombs the nuclear facilities. And like it's impossible to kind of predict what these actors might do or understand what like deep-seated tensions are in play without understanding the history of this region.
Exactly. So, first off, let's go back to 1953. So in 1953, the country of Iran had a democratic government, a secular democratic government, and their prime minister began heavily oppressing his people. And I'm just kidding. He wanted to nationalize the oil. Because that's the type of thing that the United States is going to actually care about. They don't care if you're actually oppressing your people. They're just going to, like, you try to nationalize your oil. We wanted that sweet oil. So the United States and the United Kingdom helped to back a coup d'etat on the state of Iran, in which they installed the Shah, who was this Iranian monarch by the name of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. I probably mispronounced that. I apologize. So he's in power now. He's a monarch. He's an autocrat. He's an authoritarian. And that brings us to 1957, where President Eisenhower actually signed an agreement with Iran, again, at this time being led by the Shah, to be involved in this program called the Atoms for Peace program. Basically, the United States provided them with materials and training to help start their country's nuclear program. Now, to be clear, when we're talking about nuclear program in this specific case, we're not necessarily saying like, hey, we want you to be able to start developing weapons, because as you know, as we've talked about before, nuclear doesn't just mean bombs.
Yes.
Uranium can be used for the use of energy. So
and that's so key. Like, let's think, like, if you don't have mineral deposits, like a bunch of natural resources, and like in Iran, like they've got like oil and stuff, and they're going to export that to help their economy. Like, your sources of power are really important. As a nation, you need to build your like electricity infrastructure, and so being able to establish nuclear power is like really fucking useful.
Yeah. So basically, so far we have overthrew their democratic government, installed an autocrat, and then gave them materials and training to create a nuclear program. What could possibly go wrong? Then comes the Iranian Revolution, which was happened in the years of 1978 and 1979. Basically, people were fucking pissed at the Shah.
Yeah.
And what happened was there was this uprising that removed him and replaced him with the Ayatollah, which is basically this political religious leader. And that regime has basically been in place ever since.
And note that with the Iranian Revolution in 1979 was when Tehran broke off diplomatic ties with Israel. Because like Israel will play an important role in the story of this most recent bombing. But prior to the Iranian Revolution and the installation of the Ayatollah, they had diplomatic relations. Iran was one of the first countries to, first Arab majority countries to officially like recognize Israel as a nation. And then following the Iranian Revolution, Iran and the United States kind of ended their diplomatic relations, and Iran's kind of relationship to both the United States and Israel became extremely hostile.
Yeah. Well, because we're the ones that gave them the autocrat that had been oppressing them for like 20 years.
Totally.
Now, to be clear, the Ayatollah is also an oppressive regime. He's it's a theocratic regime. It's at the time it was led by Khamenei. And he becomes the supreme leader, and they're heavily anti-Israel and they're heavily anti-United States. But again, the anti-United States sentiment comes from the fact that we
Totally.
overthrew their
overthrew their
democratic
government.
regime. Yeah, we overthrew their fucking government.
And I think that's if you go back and listen to like the "Sorry We Fucked Up Your Country" segments, that is a reoccurring theme of so many of like our interventions internationally that go horribly wrong. We
Yeah.
attempt a regime change for selfish reasons. We literally overthrow often a like reasonable, democratic, often like benevolent government that, is but that might have interests that are hostile to the United States. We overthrow them. We install like a dummy or puppet government, or one that is generally weak. They get overthrown by someone way more authoritarian and horrible, and like we put
Yeah.
the country back like in progress, like tens and tens, if not hundreds of years. And so like this is a common theme, and it is not just a theme of our regime change. This is something that happens with regime change. You can't just violently overthrow the government
100%.
and expect the whole country to just settle down.
And to just forget what you did.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the Iran hostage crisis. In 1979, this was after the Shah Pahlavi was ousted and exiled from Iran. He actually was allowed by, at the time, President Jimmy Carter to come into to the United States, to New York, for cancer treatments, which in response to that, because, Iranian militants, not a big fan of the Shah, they just ousted the guy. They took over they took over the U.S. embassy in Tehran, and they ended up taking over 50 people as hostage. And they were held for about 400 days until right after Jimmy Carter left office. Now, side note on that, real quick, just a little bit of history trivia for all of you. Another reaffirmation of the rule that Michael and I love to discuss, that we aptly call the Reagan rule. Turns out, according to Ben Barnes, who was the protege of the former Texas governor named John Connally, who worked for the Reagan campaign after an unsuccessful presidential run. So according to Barnes, who was Connally's protege, who traveled with him, Connally actually, on behalf of the Reagan campaign, went to Iran and specifically told the Iranians, no, don't release the hostages until after Reagan wins the election, because if you do that, then you'll get a better deal. All right? Because they knew that if the hostages got released, that Carter would probably end up winning re-election. So people often view Jimmy Carter as this horribly ineffective president because of the Iranian hostage crisis. The Reagan campaign literally fucking committed high treason to keep the hostages there for longer than they needed to be, which is why literally the moment after Reagan was inaugurated, the hostages were released. And again, this was confirmed by someone who was traveling with John Connally on behalf of Ronald Reagan, and spoke to the Iranians. So that's just an interesting little bit of Iranian trivia right here in this little history lesson. So that brings us to the Iran-Iraq War, where Iraq invaded Iran, and at the time, the United States was propping up this really visionary, talented leader in Iraq, this man of the people, this visionary for the future by the name of Saddam Hussein. And the war basically led to hundreds of thousands of people dying, which at the time, Madeleine Albright would later go on to call the policies regrettably short-sighted. So basically, we propped up Saddam Hussein. We defended him until eventually he invaded Kuwait, but that's a whole nother story. During that time, in 1984, the U.S. Department starts to impose sanctions on Iran and declares them to be a state sponsor of terrorism, which is a designation that continues to this day. In 1989, they had a new supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, who succeeded the former Ayatollah as a supreme leader, and he is in his 80s, and he has remained in that position for the last 36 years. Then between 1992 and 1997, more sanctions were passed by Congress and executive orders on the country of Iran to try to stop them from getting chemical weapons or nuclear weapons, which ended up crippling their oil industry and kind of destroyed their general economy, which is another reason why the Iranian people hate us and regularly chant death to America in the street. Then they were declared as part of George W. Bush's Axis of Evil in 2002. Then between the years of 2007 and 2010, there was a cyber weapons attack in conjunction with Israel that was carried out against the nuclear program. This was under originally under the Bush administration, and it was continued by the Obama administration, and people learned about it in 2010. Then Obama imposed his own sanctions between the years of 2011 and 2013 to try to block them from being able to move money internationally and also to remove their oil. Then came there was a preliminary nuclear deal in 2013, and then there was a finalized nuclear deal in 2015, which I would actually argue is probably the best foreign policy accomplishment of the Obama administration, potentially one of the best accomplishments of his entire administration, where basically the deal was that we would lift some of those sanctions in exchange for heavily restrictions on the nuclear program, limits to the amount of enrichment that you're allowed to have, and access to your nuclear facilities by inspectors.
It's huge. Independent international inspectors were able to access these facilities to ensure that they were not enriching uranium for weapons purposes.
Yeah. Now, Trump, being the fucking idiot that he is, he claims that this deal was, we paid them billions of dollars and then let them enrich uranium. It's like, no, they were enriching uranium already. We unfroze their assets and they allowed us to come in and inspect their facilities to make sure they are not building weapons. That was the fucking deal. It was a goddamn good deal.
Yeah.
Trump is just a fucking idiot. Yep. Which then led Trump to, back out of the deal in 2018, which, completely destroyed our credibility.
Yes.
To Iran, because if you make a deal, and the next fucking idiot just backs out of it for no goddamn reason, what incentive do you have to make a deal in the future? And the thing is, so the United States backed out of the deal. Iran still abided by it even after that, because the deal wasn't just made with the United States; it was also made in conjunction with various other countries.
Mm-hmm.
So then in 2020, Trump assassinated Soleimani, which I remember you and I covered that. And then, the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that led to the current conflict is increased tensions brought upon by the Israeli genocide in Gaza, which was just such an amalgamation of various different terrorist groups being provoked against Israel and being proxies between Israel and Iran, and giving them an international excuse to support various different proxy wars and proxy conflicts against Iran. And that has been finalized with what has happened today.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that, like, after like the killing of Soleimani in 2020, Iran began ignoring the limitations on its nuclear program. Somewhat makes sense. We had backed out of that nuclear deal. And then in 2023, UN inspectors reported that Iran had enriched trace amounts of uranium to nearly weapons grade levels, which was, started to spark even more kind of international alarm.
Yeah.
And we should talk a little bit about, like, the history of, like, the Israeli and Iranian relationship. So, they've been
real quick. I just want to shout out USA Today. The timeline that I just provided was a really well laid out timeline by USA Today. So if you're looking to learn more, pull up the article. which is see how 70 years of history led to the U.S. bombing in Iran.
Yeah. Those like comprehensive articles are really helpful for this kind of thing. And so, after diplomatic ties between Israel and Iran broke down in 1979, the two countries had engaged in largely like covert, like not as many like open conflicts, but largely like a lot of like covert and, as Nathan mentioned, like through proxy forces, kind of attacks back and forth, assassinations, cyber attacks, bombings, and things like that. And then one example in 2020 is specifically targeting Iran's nuclear programs with the killing of an Iranian nuclear scientist. This was not officially attributed to Israel, although Iran did blame them, as well as in 2021, a blackout that damaged some improved centrifuges at one of Iran's nuclear facilities. Again, Israel was not like an official actor here, though Iran blames Israel. And then, like, obviously we have the October 7th attack by Hamas, which is a, common proxy force for Israel, and kind of kicked off our most recent kind of exchange of more overt hostilities, which has also led, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to pretty clearly be calling for a regime change, which I think is something we should be keeping in mind as we think about the U.S.'s role here, is that, our main ally in that area, Israel, is really pushing not just to shut down their nuclear program, but to really overthrow the government of the country. And so over the last 2 weeks, Iran and Israel have really engaged in some of the most direct fighting and the most significant scale fighting that they have ever engaged in.
Yeah.
And this was kind of kicked off, at least ostensibly, because Israel believes that Iran has been able to stockpile a significant amount of highly enriched uranium in recent months, with Israel saying that Iran is close, quote, racing towards a nuclear bomb, and with Trump echoing that statement, saying he believes that Iran is, quote, very close to having one.
Yeah. And part of the pretense for that was also there was a censure that was given by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which was actually its first in 20 years, that accused Iran of having of non-compliance with their with the international standards in terms of declaring nuclear sites.
Yeah.
Basically, they were arguing that we have noticed that there appears to be various different sites with trace amounts of uranium that you have not declared as official uranium sites. Now, Western officials actually speculate that this is not necessarily indicative of the development of nuclear weapons. Instead, there was a nuclear program that to create nuclear. There was a program in Iran to create nuclear weapons that was done in secret until the year 2003, and basically the speculation is that those uranium traces come from those projects.
Yeah.
So basically, what the agency was saying was, okay, we really need access to those areas in which we are seeing these trace amounts of uranium to make sure that you are not developing nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Importantly,
and instead of doing
that would be allowed under the Iran deal and under normal like diplomatic relations with Iran.
Exactly. Instead, like 2 minutes later, Israel is like, bomb them! Yay!
Yeah,
we have an excuse now.
And I don't want to be flippant, as flippant as that particular sentiment was about.
I'll be fucking flippant,
like about the history of like this motivation and the use of this as a pretense. But the thing is, like, the Israeli government has long advocated for military action against Iran and its nuclear program, and Netanyahu is very skeptical of how useful diplomatic agreements like the Iran deal actually are in curtailing this program. And so really, like, Netanyahu's ideal situation, right, is that there's some escalation or indication that occurs that gives them a pretense to go in and begin bombing these sites. But the problem is that the most advanced nuclear enrichment site at Fordow is buried deep underground, and the IDF does not have the military ability to actually destroy it. And so the perfect scenario is to the Israeli government is the one that just occurred, right? Which is they have been conducting over the last couple weeks significant bombings of Natanz and Isfahan with their airstrikes, but they don't have the military capability to destroy Fordow, right? This most advanced enrichment facility, and really the only military with that ability is the U.S. government, because we have these enormous, quote, bunker busting bombs that are so heavy that only our B-2 bombers can actually even drop them. And so enticing the U.S. government into engaging directly in an attack on this enrichment facility is an explicit intention of the Netanyahu government. And so it is not an accident that this has kind of all come to fruition at this time, because one, historically, the U.S. president has put significant pressure on the Israeli government not to overtly attack Iran, in order to attempt to maintain lines of communication and diplomacy, not direct diplomacy. We don't have a diplomatic relationship, but through proxies, right? Trump declined to significantly pressure Israel not to do this, right? At the same time, Netanyahu knows that this is actually a key window, because previous Israeli bombings had destroyed Iran's most sophisticated air defense systems. So now the Israeli pilots have a clear advantage that is kind of expiring, and they have to take advantage of it. And also at the same time, Netanyahu's bombing of Iran serves to help disrupt the diplomatic talks between U.S. and Iran, which have been ongoing for months, in order to try to get to a place to prevent further enrichment of uranium by Iran. So to Nathan's point, like he said it kind of flippantly, they use this as a pretext to go in and bomb this area, but it's pretty clear that is indeed the case, that this is, and especially when combined with the fact that, we mentioned that there have been, there's a reasonable reason why they might have enriched uranium, right, for their nuclear power program, even if they were compliant with the Iran deal. But the other thing is, and we've also mentioned that Israel has said that they're racing towards a nuclear bomb, but U.S. intelligence agencies have found that is not the case. So Trump's own U.S. Director of National Intelligence, just a few months ago in March, delivered a testimony to the Intelligence Committee saying, quote, that Iran, quote, continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and that Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. And that they also have found that they would be months, not imminently, they would be months and months from being able to develop a nuclear weapon or, quote, break out, which is the term used. So they are, this threat is no more imminent now than it has been at any time in the past, 5 or 6 years. And so it's clearly a pretense to go in and, execute a long-standing military objective for the Israeli government, which is to destroy their nuclear program altogether.
Yeah. And so Trump was actually asked about that. He was actually asked about the fact that his own intelligence agency basically said, no, they don't have nuclear weapons. So there was an exchange from a reporter in New Jersey last Friday, where the reporter asked, quote, what intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community had said they have no evidence that they are at this point. Trump responded by saying, well then, my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that? The reporter said, your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Trump said, she's wrong.
Yeah.
He later said aboard Air Force One, quote, I don't care what she said. I think they're close to having one.
Yeah.
So, and it's not just the U.S. It's not just U.S. intelligence. The very agency that I talked about earlier that voted to censure. So the International Atomic Energy Agency. Their intelligence has also confirmed that no, they are not building a nuclear weapon, that there's no evidence that they're building a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
The only intelligence that exists that is making the claim, that claims to say that they actually are developing nuclear weapons, is Israeli intelligence. Now, here's the problem with that. Let me quote Netanyahu real quick. All right, let me quote Netanyahu. Within 3 to 5 years, we can assume that Iran will be autonomous in its ability to develop and produce a nuclear weapon. He said that in 1992. He repeated it in a book he wrote in 1995. Then he appeared in front of a congressional committee, and he actually claimed that Iraq and Iran were racing to obtain nuclear weapons in 2002, which, by the way, was him working with the Bush administration to try to justify the Iraq War.
Yeah.
Then WikiLeaks revealed that he told members of Congress that Iran was just 1 to 2 years away from nuclear capability in 2009. Then he said, quote, by next spring and most by next summer, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage in 2012. My point is the Israeli government, and especially Netanyahu, do not have a very credible track record when it comes to saying whether or not Iran is developing a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
And if the only intelligence that suggests that they are developing a nuclear weapon comes from a government that is historically wrong about this and has been historically wrong about this since 1992, something tells me that we should look other places for potential evidence, because they're not like.
Yeah, like maybe
or maybe just listen to our own listen to our own intelligence intelligence agencies.
Yeah.
And the thing is, this totally fucking reeks of Iraq. All right? I mean, it's kind of amazing, the historical parallels that we see between the pretext for Iraq and the pretext for Iran. Now, to be fair, Trump is, nominally trying to get some type of peace deal. But this was also after he floated that, oh, well, maybe there should be a regime change. They say regime change is a bad thing to say. Why shouldn't there be a regime change? So who knows what he actually thinks? Who knows what he actually wants? He's claiming he's trying to negotiate a ceasefire, and maybe, and there is currently a ceasefire. We'll see how long that it holds. But the fact of the matter is, the bombing that the United States enacted on Iran was absolutely under false pretenses.
Yeah.
It was under false pretenses where there was faulty evidence. Mm-hmm. And it was fear-mongering about a foreign Middle Eastern leader having weapons of mass destruction. We have been here before, all right? Except the one difference I would say is that at least the Bush administration actually tried to have a pretty well-run propaganda campaign to attempt to sell the war to the American people, all right? At least they had the decency to fabricate evidence. Trump is out there literally just saying, oh, I think they do. I think they do have nuclear weapons. So yeah, that's why we're going to do this, because I think they have nuclear weapons. Your own intelligence community says that they don't. Yeah, I don't care what they say. I don't care what they say. I think they do. I think they do. Like, they're not even trying to lie to us. They're not even trying to fabricate evidence Like it's the most fucking insane thing ever. And let me also point another thing out. Now, to be clear, no, I don't want any countries to have nuclear weapons. All right. In my perfect world, no country has nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
The only purpose of nuclear weapons is to kill civilians. All right. Is to carpet bomb, is to completely bomb cities into oblivion and kill civilians. All right. Their function today is basically a peace through mutually assured destruction,
Yeah.
which, you know, is one of those things that works great until it doesn't. And then
And
the
then you
entire
have
fucking world
mutually
is gone.
assured destruction through mutually assured destruction.
Exactly. So, like, I don't want any country to have nuclear weapons. So I just want to be clear. I'm not saying that I want Iran to have nuclear weapons. I do not want Iran to have nuclear weapons. But you also need to understand, why would they want nuclear weapons in the first place? Well, the Trump administration wants to sell you on the idea that they want to have nuclear weapons so that they can bomb Cleveland. All right. That's why they want to have their nuclear weapons, because they want to be able to bomb Cleveland. Here's the thing about that. They bomb Cleveland, we wipe them off the face of the earth. And they know that. They're smart enough to know that. All right. And also, to be clear, even if they did develop nuclear weapons, they'd also have to develop propulsion technology in order to actually get to us, which they don't fucking have. Like the thing you need to realize here. Let me Michael. Let me provide a nice little example, Michael. So, if I were to say, who is the most dangerous madman on the face of this planet, not counting Trump, not Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually, you got it before. I was going to say, like, not counting Trump or Putin, but yeah, Kim Jong-un. All right.
No, he
Kim
pretty
Jong-un.
much takes the cake. Yeah.
yeah. Kim Jong-un takes the cake. So this is a madman, and he has nuclear weapons, right?
Mhm.
You know? So why haven't we invaded North Korea? Why haven't we bombed North Korea? Why haven't we tried to do a regime change in North Korea? Because if we did, they would bomb South Korea off the fucking map. And we know that.
Mhm.
And they know that, which is why we leave them the fuck alone. See, that is a status that nuclear powers that nuclear powers have.
Yeah.
They
can assert,
know,
regardless of the size of the country or its power otherwise.
yeah. You know, Kim Jong-un knows the world sees him as a madman. And if we try to fuck with him, he will he'll bomb Seoul. He'll bomb South Korea with his nuclear weapons. Now, mind you, if he does that, you know, we'll wipe him off the face of the earth, but still.
But this is the tenuous balance of, like, peace through mutually assured destruction. It's all about
Exactly.
leverage.
Exactly. You know, I'll give you another example. So remember that time that we invaded Afghanistan because they were hiding Osama bin Laden? Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
But then remember that time that it turned out that Osama bin Laden was actually in Pakistan and not actually in Afghanistan? Remember that? Did we bomb Pakistan? Did we launch a war against Pakistan? Did we invade Pakistan? You know, other than the operation that actually that specifically targeted Osama bin Laden and killed Osama bin Laden. Did we do any of that stuff?
No.
No, we didn't. And you know what Pakistan has? Nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
My point is, the reason why we should have automatically known that the Iraq war was bullshit was if Saddam Hussein actually had weapons of mass destruction, we wouldn't want to touch that country with a 50-foot pole.
Yeah.
All right? We would stay the fuck away from Iraq. Because if we invaded Iraq, he'd use them. He'd use them. That's why we don't invade nuclear powers. That's why we don't start wars with nuclear powers.
Yeah.
So if we actually thought that Iran was weeks away or even months away from developing nuclear weapons, do you think that we would actually risk bombing them? Do you think we would actually risk pissing them off?
Sure.
Of course not. That would be stupid. That would be dumb.
Yeah.
No one would fucking do that. Even Trump is not stupid enough to do something like that.
Yeah.
And
totally.
that is how you know that they're lying.
Totally.
That is how you know that they're lying.
That's a very compelling argument. Because you would have to believe that your intelligence is so good that you're not a week or two wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, yeah, I think that is such a compelling point. It just, yeah, you don't bully a country with nuclear weapons. So if we're bullying a country, they don't have them. And I mean, and like, sure, the thing is, like, there is some evidence that Iran is enriching uranium beyond what is necessary for civilian power, like, requirements. That's somewhat documented. There are investigators there, like, and this is a problem. And they are likely doing this, right? To one, reduce their breakout time, right? Because like the longer it takes from like today to when they could have a nuclear weapon is like a pretty important measure of their ability to accomplish it and their leverage overall internationally. So if they're trying to gain leverage for diplomatic negotiations to try to reduce sanctions, one of the ways that they could do that is enriching uranium beyond what is necessary for civilian power. But the thing is, like, there isn't evidence that they have like significant weapons grade uranium or like the ability to get there to enrich it to that level super soon.
Yeah. But it is also important to note that so you know how I talked about the International Atomic Energy Agency, how they were basically the ones that they make sure that various different countries are declaring nuclear sites, that they're following the agreements that they set up. Iran's parliament just passed a bill to suspend the country's cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency in response to Trump's bombings.
Yes. See,
so
and that's the thing. The path to control here is diplomacy.
Yeah.
And partially that's because, like, if we bomb someone like we did, that makes them more motivated. That would reasonably make them more motivated to pursue a nuclear weapon. Because to Nathan's point, you know what we don't do to countries that have nuclear weapons? Bomb them.
Yeah.
And so it puts the onus on Iran to like get a nuclear weapon as quickly as possible in order to either neutralize what they view as a threat and an unreliable diplomatic party like the United States. Like, I'm not trying to take Iran's side here, but I'm just saying, like, the play of let's like figuratively blow up our diplomacy by literally blowing up their facilities is a very short-sighted one, especially when two things are true. One, they don't have a nuclear weapon and they're not that close to it. And two, if we failed to actually fully neutralize the potential that at some point in the future they like could have a nuclear weapon, right? Like, I'm not saying we should destroy their power grid and infrastructure, but if you were attempting to fully destroy their nuclear program, you better fucking do it. If you're going to like, and so, which makes this action all the more reckless because, so Trump has stated, as well as many in his administration, that, quote, Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. This has been echoed by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, releasing a statement that said, quote, we assess that the American strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, combined with the Israeli strikes on other elements of Iran's military nuclear program, has set back Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons by many years. The achievement can be continued indefinitely if Iran does not get access to nuclear material. However, in a preliminary Defense Intelligence Agency's battle damage assessment, which was compiled by a combination of satellite imagery, like intelligence gathering, as well as gleaned from communications with Iranian officials, found that the Iranian nuclear program may have only been set back by a matter of months. So rather than it being obliterated or totally stopped, it may have only been set back by a couple of months. So if they were attempting to pursue a nuclear bomb, like a nuclear weapon, this has like just poked the bear, right? And barely set back the program at all. So basically, like, we have this like deep underground facility, and what this intelligence report found is that It is so deep underground. They're like their Fordow facility, which is their most advanced one. It's so deep underground that it is likely largely intact, and that basically what we did, even with these large bunker busting munitions, is like basically like cut off the access and entrance to this thing. So basically, if they can get it, get that back opened up, the entrance back open, electrical and water supplies running, it is likely that they would be able to continue their enrichment program in just a matter of a few months. And now this is a preliminary report, and I think that's key, but it's consistent with other, with findings of the intelligence community. The other thing is, the Defense Intelligence Agency report also indicates that there's evidence that Iran has moved a stockpile of enriched uranium, which means that we didn't even fucking get it all. So, like, if they were intending, or if they do intend to enrich uranium to a point where it is weapons grade, they still have a stockpile that they could use to do it, and now we don't know where it is. So the director general of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the one Nathan's mentioned a couple times, has indicated that he believes that they have moved this nuclear material, but they said that they have no accounting of it at all. They don't know where it is. And current and former national security officials expressed concerns that leaving Iran with the residual nuclear capabilities that they do have, including working centrifuges, which they likely still have in their facilities that they can get access to as well as elsewhere, right? That they would be able to enrich the uranium that we believe they already have enriched to 60% up to that 90% range in a relatively short period of time. So converting this uranium from this 60% enriched to weapons grade 90% could take approximately 1 to 2 weeks with the right facilities. Now, again, there's propulsion, there's all this stuff to make it into a weapon, but that is that is now uranium that is just kind of off the grid, that we are not able to track, because again, we have cut off these diplomatic relations in favor of bombing this country.
And I just wanted to point something else out. Let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz for just a second. So the Strait of Hormuz is a trade route that is in the Persian Gulf that is controlled by Iran, and it is responsible for about 35% of seaborne oil supply and 20% of global LNG exports as of 2024. So it links, basically it links the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman. Again, 20% of global LNG supply come through this strait. And the Iran parliament, in response to what has happened, voted to close it. Now, that needs to be confirmed and carried out by the Ayatollah, but unless there is some type of diplomatic agreement to not do that, I see no reason why he wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And if he did this, then fossil fuel prices globally would fucking skyrocket.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to point something out. Trump ran on, number one, lowering prices.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, being anti-war. And if this ceasefire does not hold, at best, we're looking at Iraq 2.0. At worst, because of global alliances with Iran, we're looking at World War III. So if this ceasefire does not hold, and I hope it does, the peace president will have plunged us into another fucking Middle Eastern conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And to boot, prices will fucking skyrocket.
And now it's time for a more lighthearted segment, Tips for Good. So Nathan, why do we do Tips for Good every week?
Well, Michael, I'm so glad you asked, because we do Tips for Good every week because I got the moves like Jagger. I got the moves like Jagger. I got the moo, ooh, 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 ooves like Jagger.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. That's tips are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because moves like Jagger make the world a better place.
They do.
For sure.
I have to agree that, which coincidentally is the real reason why we actually do tips for
Oh,
good.
That makes sense. Okay,
That
well,
right
maybe we
there,
should just
that
skip to
right-
that.
Let's just skip to that. Let's
Great
just do
idea.
that.
Amazing.
So, Michael, what is our tip for good this week?
All right. Well, today we have a really simple one. There's an organization called fairvote.org. They advocate for voting reform, specifically ranked choice voting. And if you've listened to this show for a while, you know that we've talked about ranked choice voting a few times, not only in isolation as like an interesting way to improve our democracy and reduce the spoiler effect of third-party candidates and improve the way our first-past-the-post system works. But also we've talked about it in the context of the way that it has delivered for great candidates in various elections, like in Alaska, or as in the Democratic mayoral primary that just occurred. So ranked choice voting is great. You should love it. If you don't know about it, go listen to our episode about ranked choice voting. But fairvote.org is an advocacy organization that organizes in support of ranked choice voting. And so the small act you can do today is go to fairvote.org/get-involved and just sign up for their newsletter. Let them email you, start to read about their initiatives, start to just dip your toe into the water of getting involved with the organization. Because ranked choice voting could really be a way that we transform the way that our democracy delivers on people's actual values and removes the problematic incentives that occur when we have just a two-party winner-take-all system.
And that's tips for good.
And now it's time for our favorite segment,
Ass Hat of the Week.
So Nathan, who is our ass hat this week?
Well, Michael, I'm so happy to announce this week's ass hat is right-wing commentator Charlie Kirk.
Ooh, that is great news.
Charred turkey, come on down.
Turkey. That's awesome. So what did Charred Turkey do to get on our show this week?
I'm proud of that one.
That's really good.
So as a lot of you probably have already heard, there was a Democratic primary this week in New York for the New York mayoral election.
Mhm.
And one Zoran Mamdani, a Muslim progressive democratic socialist, won. And
Amazing.
because it's New York, a heavily Democratic city, he has a really good shot of winning. He has a really good shot of winning the mayoral race. So, look, you and I, when we are criticizing politicians, sometimes we'll take pot shots at them, pot shots about things
Sure.
about them. But for the most part, you and I try to focus on things like policy, right?
Sure. Yeah. Or the fact that someone's like orange.
Yeah, exactly. So, charred turkey, I
Doesn't quite live up to
kind of
those
had a,
ideas.
yeah, no, exactly. So in response to it, he tweeted, quote, 24 years ago, a group of Muslims killed 2,753 people on 9/11.
Jesus Christ.
Now a Muslim socialist is on pace to run New York City. Jesus fucking Christ. You are such an asshole. Like,
his people did 9/11 is supposed to be like ironic.
he's
like a
from
joke? Like,
fucking
that's-
Uganda.
Oh my god.
He's
that's
from
fucking
Uganda.
crazy. Oh
The
my
people that
God.
hijacked our planes, most of them were from fucking Saudi Arabia. This
And
dude's from
also-
fucking Uganda.
And also, you wouldn't be like, yeah, the Saudi Arabian person shouldn't run New York. It's like, no, it's that's just the terrorists.
Yeah, no, my
that did the
point
9/11.
is, yeah. No, my point is, like, the guy's too dumb to even make a good bigot.
yeah,
like-
exactly. Yeah.
Be somewhat, have some fucking basis. Like, Jesus Christ, he is so far removed from the people that did 9/11. Like, the dude Like the dude's my age.
Yeah.
Or like a little bit older than me. The dude's a little bit
Sure.
older than me. The dude was like, what, like 9, 10 when 9/11 happened? Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah.
Like-
Jesus fucking Christ. That is just like, oh my God. It's so fucking racist.
It's so fucking racist.
And these people are like, oh, but you guys are racist against white people. So,
Yeah, and a lot of people pointed out, like, okay, so the Oklahoma City bombings, a white Christian. Does that mean that white Christians should be barred from running for public office in Oklahoma?
I guess so.
Yeah, guess so. I mean, you set the standard. No,
It's not tips for good. We should. This tips for good. We're barring white people from running for office in Oklahoma. Just kidding.
yeah, it's again, it's the same shit that we saw like right after 9/11. The same bullshit
Yeah.
bigotry, which by the way helped to lead us into two 2-decade wars, over 2-decade-long wars in the Middle East,
Mhm.
and led to hate crimes against Muslims in the United States. Like, dude, I don't know if you Charlie Kirk, I don't know if you knew this, but we have this little thing in this country called the First Amendment. A part of the First Amendment is freedom of religion, which means that you can practice whatever religion you want in this country because, you know, we have freedom of religion. If you'd rather live in a theocracy, there are a few I could recommend. Mind you, most of them are Muslim, but
So congratulations to Charred Turkey for being this week's
ass hat of the week.
And now we will end our show as we usually do with our highlights. So Nathan, what's your highlight this week?
Well, Michael, my highlight this week would have to be lots of father-daughter time.
Nice. That's great.
You know, Sylvia's at the point where she is able to she knows that things have names. Like she knows that objects have names. I can point to, like, I'll lay out objects in front of her and I'll be like, "Hey, Sylvia, hand me the controller," and she'll hand me the controller. Like, "Sylvia, hand me the water cup." She'll hand me the water cup. You know, she's a smart little thing, and you know, just day in the life being a dad.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah. What about you, Mike's? What's your highlight?
I think I'm just so happy to be home. I've been pretty much traveling in one form or another for work or vacation or camping for about a month straight. And it's just so nice to be back at my house for a few days and just get to be home. It's awesome.
Nice.
So now
Nice.
we'll thank the amazing people that make this show possible. So thank you to our patrons, Jerry DeViller, Fade Out Scoop, Taylor Bloom, Tobias Janssen, and Kyle Chaska. And thank you to our amazing editor, Kayla, for all they do to make this show possible. And thank you, dear listener, for listening to The Perspectrum, and you'll hear from us again next week.